The eviction notice arrived on the same December morning that Maria Santos's ancient Honda Civic decided to breathe its last mechanical breath in the parking lot of Riverside Elementary. Black smoke pouring from under the hood like a funeral. Pyre for her dwindling hopes. The timing couldn't have been more cruel. 72 hours to vacate the apartment she'd called home for 3 years, and now no transportation to get to the 2 part-time jobs that barely kept her and her 8-year-old daughter Elena afloat in the first place. At 32, Maria had become a master of financial juggling, but even her carefully orchestrated dance of minimum payments, borrowed time, and creative budgeting was finally collapsing under the weight of medical bills from Elena's asthma, treatments, and the reality that minimum wage in Millfield, Connecticut simply wasn't enough to survive on anymore. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning had started with such ordinary promise. Maria had woken at 5:15 as always, tiptoeing through their cramped one-bedroom apartment to avoid disturbing Elena before her alarm. She'd prepared breakfast with the last of their cereal, watered down the milk to make it stretch another day, and even managed to pack a lunch that included an apple, a small luxury she'd allowed herself after finding $2 in quarters scattered under the couch cushions the night before. Elena had been excited about her school's upcoming science fair, chattering about volcanoes and solar systems, while Maria helped her pack her inhaler and reminded her to see the nurse if she felt short of breath. It was supposed to be a day like any other in their carefully maintained routine of making the best of not having enough. But then the Honda had wheezed its final breath, leaving Maria stranded in the school parking lot with other parents rushing past in their functioning vehicles, heading to jobs that paid enough to cover both rent and car repairs. The mechanic she'd called had been brutally honest. "The engine's shot, Maria. Even if I could patch it together, we're talking $1,500 minimum, and honestly, it's not worth putting money into a car that old. $1,500 might as well have been 15 million. She'd thanked him, ended the call, and stood in the December cold, watching her breath create small clouds that disappeared as quickly as her options seemed to be vanishing. The eviction notice in her purse felt heavier than paper had any right to feel. $1,200 for rent that was already a month behind, plus late fees that seemed to multiply overnight. Her job at the medical billing company provided 22 hours a week at $11 an hour, and her weekend shifts at the diner brought in maybe another $150 if tips were good. Elena's after-school program cost $200 a month, but Maria couldn't afford to quit working to pick her up at 3:30, and she certainly couldn't afford to leave an 8-year-old home alone until midnight when her diner shifts ended. Maria's phone buzzed with a text from Elena's teacher. "Reminder, science fair project materials due Friday. Please send $15 for supplies by tomorrow." Another small knife twist in an already impossible situation. Elena had been so excited about creating a working model of the water cycle, had been sketching plans and reading library books about precipitation and evaporation. Now Maria would have to disappoint her daughter again, would have to watch that bright spark of enthusiasm dim when she explained they couldn't afford poster board and plastic containers. The worst part was Elena's uncomplaining acceptance of their circumstances. At 8 years old, she'd already learned not to ask for things other kids took for granted. New clothes, birthday parties, toys that weren't from the dollar store clearance bin. She developed her father's quiet resilience, a trait that simultaneously broke Maria's heart and filled her with fierce pride. Every time she saw Elena carefully rationing her snacks to make them last, or heard her tell classmates she wasn't hungry when offered treats they couldn't reciprocate, Maria thought of Carlos and how different their lives were supposed to be. They'd had such beautiful plans once. Carlos's promotion to shift supervisor at the manufacturing plant was going to let Maria go back to school and finish her nursing degree. They were going to buy a house with a yard where Elena could play safely, maybe even get the dog she'd been asking for since she could talk. They were going to take real vacations, not just day trips to free museums, and save money for Elena's college education. But a drunk driver running a red light on Route 9 had ended all those dreams 4 years ago, leaving Maria with a folded flag, a life insurance payout that had barely covered funeral expenses and immediate bills, and a 4-year-old daughter who kept asking when Daddy was coming home from his long trip. The insurance money was long gone, consumed by the endless appetite of basic survival. Rent, utilities, food, Elena's medical needs, childcare costs that ate up almost everything. Maria earned. She'd applied for assistance programs, but there was always a waiting list, always another form to fill out, always some bureaucratic requirement she couldn't meet while working 2 jobs and raising a child alone. The social worker had been kind, but honest. Single mothers are our largest demographic, Maria. We're doing what we can, but resources are limited and demand keeps growing. Standing in the elementary school parking lot, watching the last of the functioning cars disappear as parents headed to jobs that paid living wages, Maria felt the familiar tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with asthma and everything to do with the crushing weight of impossible circumstances. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through job listings she'd already memorized, hoping against hope that something new had appeared overnight. House cleaning services that paid cash under the table but offered no benefits or job security. Delivery drivers needed. But she no longer had a vehicle that could make it across town, let alone handle the daily wear of commercial use. Data entry positions that required experience she didn't have, and certification courses she couldn't afford. Then she saw it, a new posting that hadn't been there the night before. Property assessment specialist needed for industrial site evaluation. 3-day contract position. Immediate start available. Must be detail-oriented and comfortable working independently. $800 cash payment upon completion. Maria's heart raced as she read the description twice, then 3 times. $800 wouldn't solve all their problems, but it would buy them another month in the apartment, would let her get the Honda towed and maybe put toward a down payment on something reliable from the used car lot that advertised no credit. No problem. Financing, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The posting was brief, almost cryptic. Contact information led to Clearwater Property Management, a company she'd never heard of despite living in Millfield her entire life. The job description mentioned abandoned industrial facility assessment and comprehensive inventory of remaining assets, which sounded straightforward enough. She'd done similar work during her brief stint with a real estate company before. Elena was born, cataloguing properties for estate sales and bankruptcy auctions. It was tedious but not difficult work, and the pay rate suggested either urgency or unusual circumstances that worked in her favor. Maria called the number immediately, her hands shaking slightly as she dialed. A professional-sounding woman answered on the second ring. Clearwater Property Management. This is Jennifer speaking. Maria explained she was calling about the assessment position, and Jennifer's response was almost suspiciously enthusiastic. Oh, excellent. Are you available to start tomorrow? The property owner is eager to move forward with the assessment process, and frankly, you're the first qualified applicant we've had. Qualified applicants seemed generous, given that Maria's experience was limited, but she wasn't about to point that out. The details Jennifer provided were straightforward enough. The Millfield industrial complex had been abandoned for nearly 5 years following the closure of Apex Manufacturing, which had produced automotive parts for major car companies until overseas competition and changing technology made their operations obsolete. The property had been tied up in bankruptcy proceedings and environmental assessments, but had finally been cleared for sale. Maria's job would be to create a comprehensive inventory of any remaining equipment, assess the general condition of the buildings, and photograph everything for potential buyers. "The facility is quite large," Jennifer explained, "which is why we're offering such competitive compensation for what should be straightforward work. The main manufacturing floor, office complex, and warehouse spaces need to be thoroughly documented. Previous assessments were incomplete, so we need someone detail-oriented who can work systematically through the entire property." She paused briefly. "I should mention that the site is quite isolated. Cell service can be spotty and you'll be working alone, so we need someone comfortable with independent work in industrial environments." The isolation didn't bother Maria. If anything, it sounded peaceful compared to the constant stress of her usual work environments. The medical billing office was a cramped space filled with ringing phones and frustrated patients, while the diner was an endless stream of demanding customers and hot, greasy air that left her clothes smelling like French fries and exhaustion. 3 days alone in a quiet industrial facility, methodically cataloguing equipment and taking photographs, sounded almost meditative by comparison. Jennifer arranged to meet Maria at the property the following morning to provide access keys and detailed instructions. "I'll show you around briefly, point out the areas that need special attention, and then leave you to work at your own pace. Most contractors prefer to work without supervision, and we've found that independent workers tend to be more thorough when left to their own devices." She provided an address on Industrial Park Road, about 20 minutes outside Millfield proper, and confirmed that payment would be made in cash upon completion of the assessment. That evening, Maria sat at their small kitchen table helping Elena with her homework while researching the Apex manufacturing facility on her laptop, a refurbished model she'd bought 3 years ago that now required a constant connection to its charger to function. Elena was working on a math worksheet with focused determination, occasionally asking for help with word problems that seemed designed to frustrate both children and parents. "Mom, if Mrs. Johnson has 48 cookies and she wants to share them equally among 6 children, how many cookies does each child get?" Elena asked, her forehead wrinkled in concentration. "Let's think about it together," Maria said, reviewing. "The problem, if we have 48 cookies and 6 children, we need to divide 48 by 6. What's a number we can multiply by 6 to get close to 48? Elena counted on her fingers, then brightened. 8. 6 times 8 is 48. Perfect. You're getting really good at division, sweetheart. Elena beamed with pride, then returned to her worksheet with renewed confidence. While Elena worked through the remaining problems, Maria researched the industrial facility online. What she found was surprisingly sparse. A few outdated business directory listings, some newspaper articles from 5 years ago about the plant closure and its impact on local employment, and several real estate listings that described the property in vague terms. Apex Manufacturing had employed nearly 200 people at its peak, producing precision automotive components for major manufacturers. The closure had been attributed to changing market conditions and increased foreign competition, though some of the older newspaper articles hinted at financial irregularities and management disputes that may have contributed to the company's downfall. The facility itself appeared to be substantial, over 300,000 square feet of manufacturing space, plus administrative offices and warehouse areas spread across a 40-acre site. Aerial photographs from the county assessor's website showed a complex of connected buildings surrounded by employee parking areas that were now empty except for weeds growing through cracks in the asphalt. The main manufacturing building was a massive structure with a sawtooth roof design typical of mid-20th century industrial architecture, while the office complex appeared to be a more recent addition with modern glass and steel construction. Elena finished her homework and moved on to reading practice, sounding out words from a book about marine biology that she'd chosen from the school library. "Look, Mum, this fish can make its own light," she said excitedly, pointing to a picture of an anglerfish. "It's called bioluminescence. That means living light in science words." Maria marveled at her daughter's curiosity and intelligence, at the way Elena absorbed information like a sponge and made connections between different concepts. She deserved so much more than their current circumstances could provide. Better schools, educational opportunities, the chance to explore her interests without the constant shadow of financial stress limiting her possibilities. After Elena went to bed, Maria continued her research, driven by a combination of professional thoroughness and nervous energy about the job ahead. She studied industrial assessment procedures, reviewed her notes from her previous real estate work, and tried to anticipate what she might encounter at the abandoned facility. The more she read about Apex Manufacturing, the more she realized how little concrete information was available about the company's actual operations or the circumstances of its closure. Most of the details were frustratingly vague, which struck her as odd for a company that had been such a significant local employer. One article from the Millfield Gazette caught her attention. Former Apex employees report unusual circumstances surrounding plant closure. The piece was brief and seemed to have been relegated to a back page, but it quoted several former employees who claimed the shutdown had been abrupt and unexplained. "One day we were working normally, and the next day security guards were escorting us out and telling us not to come back," said Robert Chen, who had worked in quality control for 12 years. "They wouldn't let us collect our personal belongings or finish projects we'd been working on for months. It wasn't like a normal business closure. It felt like something had gone wrong, something they didn't want us to know about." Another, former employee, Linda Rodriguez, described similar confusion. "Management told us it was financial problems, but the company had just signed a major contract extension with Detroit Automotive. We were hiring new people, not laying anyone off. Then suddenly everything stopped, and they brought in outside contractors to secure the facility. We never got clear answers about what happened to the equipment or why the closure had to be so immediate." The article mentioned that several employees had filed complaints with the State Labor Board regarding unpaid wages and benefits, but there was no follow-up reporting on the outcome of those complaints. The lack of information made Maria slightly uneasy, but $800 in cash was $800 in cash. She needed this job too desperately to let vague concerns about a 5-year-old business closure affect her decision. Industrial facilities closed all the time due to economic pressures, and the circumstances probably seemed more mysterious to former employees than they actually were. Management likely had information about financial problems that they couldn't or wouldn't share with the workforce, and the abrupt closure was probably related to bankruptcy proceedings or legal requirements that necessitated immediate cessation of operations. Maria set her alarm for 6 in the morning, laid out clothes suitable for industrial work, jeans, sturdy shoes, a warm jacket for December weather, and tried to push aside the nervous energy that always accompanied new jobs and unfamiliar situations. 3 days of systematic work, $800 in cash, and maybe a stepping stone to more opportunities with Clearwater Property Management. She couldn't afford to let anxiety about unknown sabotage what might be her best chance to stabilize their situation before the eviction deadline arrived. The next morning dawned grey and cold, typical December weather that made everything seem more challenging than it needed to be. Maria dropped Elena off at school with promises to pick her up at the usual time and reminders about her inhaler and the importance of telling an adult if she felt any breathing difficulties. Elena hugged her tightly at the school entrance, something She didn't always do now that she was getting older and more conscious of appearing babyish in front of her classmates. "Have a good day at work, Mom," Elena said seriously. "I hope you find interesting things to photograph." Maria's heart swelled with love for this remarkable little person who somehow maintained optimism and curiosity despite all the challenges their circumstances presented. Elena deserved stability, deserved opportunities, deserved a mother who could provide more than constant financial stress and makeshift solutions to basic problems. The drive to Industrial Park Road took Maria through parts of Millfield she rarely had reason to visit, former manufacturing areas that had seen better days, with empty storefronts and 4 lease signs that had been up so long they'd faded from weather exposure. The Apex manufacturing facility was located at the end of a dead-end road, isolated from other businesses and surrounded by undeveloped land that had probably been intended for additional industrial development that never materialized. When the facility came into view, Maria's first impression was of sheer scale. The complex was massive, much larger than the photographs had suggested, with the main manufacturing building dominating the landscape like a monument to industrial ambition. The architecture was a mixture of utilitarian functionality and mid-century optimism. Clean lines, large windows, and efficient design that spoke to an era when American manufacturing was thriving and confident about its future. Jennifer was waiting in the parking lot, standing beside a silver sedan and checking her phone with the impatient air of someone accustomed to tight schedules. She was younger than Maria had expected, probably in her early 30s, with professional attire that seemed slightly out of place in the industrial setting. Her handshake was firm, her manner businesslike but not unfriendly. "Maria, thank you for coming out so early. I know the location is a bit remote, but that's part of what makes this property attractive to potential buyers. Plenty of space for expansion and no neighboring businesses to create conflicts." Jennifer gestured toward the complex with evident pride. Apex Manufacturing was quite successful for many years. They specialized in precision automotive components, things like transmission housings, engine mounts, brake system parts. High-quality work that required sophisticated equipment and skilled technicians. As they walked toward the main entrance, Jennifer provided a brief overview of the facility's layout. The manufacturing floor occupied the largest building, with specialized areas for different stages of production, raw material storage, machining, assembly, quality control, and finished goods warehouse. The office complex housed administrative functions, engineering departments, and management suites. A separate building contained maintenance shops, employee facilities, and what Jennifer described as specialized storage areas that would need particular attention during the assessment. The previous assessment contractors focused primarily on the obvious equipment, the major manufacturing machinery, office furniture, things like that, Jennifer explained as she unlocked the main entrance. But potential buyers need a complete picture of what's here, including smaller equipment, tools, infrastructure components, anything that might have value or require special handling for removal. She handed Maria a set of keys and a detailed floor plan. "Take your time, be thorough, and don't hesitate to call if you have questions, though, as I mentioned, cell service can be unreliable out here." The interior of the facility was a time capsule, preserved almost exactly as it had been when operations ceased 5 years earlier. The main manufacturing floor stretched out like an aircraft hangar, filled with sophisticated machinery that represented millions of dollars in equipment investment. Computer-controlled lathes, precision milling machines, automated assembly stations, all covered with protective plastic but clearly maintained in operational condition. It was like discovering a ghost ship, complete and functional but eerily devoid of the human activity that had once given it purpose. Maria began her systematic documentation in the main manufacturing area, photographing each piece of equipment and noting model numbers, apparent condition, and approximate dimensions. The work was methodical, but not unpleasant, and she found herself impressed by the sophistication of the operation Apex had maintained. This wasn't the kind of low-tech manufacturing that had been easily displaced by overseas competition. This was precision work that required significant skill and investment in advanced equipment. As she moved through the facility, Maria noticed details that seemed inconsistent with a typical automotive parts manufacturer. Security was more sophisticated than she would have expected, with card reader systems and reinforced doors in areas that contained nothing more sensitive than office equipment. The ventilation system was remarkably advanced, with filtration capabilities that seemed excessive for standard manufacturing operations. And there were areas marked authorized personnel only that were secured with locks requiring different and keys than the ones Jennifer had provided. By noon, Maria had completed roughly a quarter of the facility, working through the main manufacturing floor and beginning to explore the office complex. The administrative areas were as well preserved as the manufacturing spaces, with computer workstations still in place and filing cabinets that appeared to contain complete records of the company's operations. She was photographing the engineering department when she noticed something that made her pause and look more carefully at her surroundings. Hidden behind a bookshelf in what appeared to be the chief engineer's office, Maria discovered an elevator that wasn't marked on any of the floor plans Jennifer had provided. The elevator doors were pristine stainless steel, unmarked by any company logos or floor indicators that might explain their purpose. Maria ran her fingers along the smooth surface, feeling for the subtle outline where the doors met, confirming what her eyes were telling her. This was definitely an elevator, hidden behind what appeared to be a decorative bookshelf that had been carefully positioned to conceal the entrance from casual observation. The bookshelf itself was mounted on tracks, she realized, designed to slide aside when accessed by someone who knew the mechanism existed. Maria stepped back and examined the engineering office more carefully, looking for activation switches or access panels that might reveal how the concealed elevator operated. The office belonged to someone named Dr. Sarah Mitchell, according to the nameplate still sitting on the mahogany desk, and the space reflected the organized mind of a serious professional. Technical drawings covered one wall, detailed schematics for automotive components that looked far more complex than the relatively simple parts she'd observed in the manufacturing areas. Advanced materials specifications, stress analysis calculations, and what appeared to be electromagnetic field diagrams suggested Dr. Mitchell had been working on projects that pushed the boundaries of conventional automotive technology. A framed photograph on the desk showed Dr. Mitchell with a team of engineers, all wearing lab coats and standing in front of equipment that didn't match anything Maria had seen in the main manufacturing facility. The setting looked more like a research laboratory than a production floor, with clean rooms, sophisticated testing apparatus, and monitoring systems that belonged in a university or government facility rather than a commercial automotive parts manufacturer. Dr. Mitchell appeared to be in her 40s, with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to complex problem-solving and high-stakes decision-making. Maria photographed everything in the office, including the concealed elevator and the technical materials that hinted at research activities beyond Apex's publicly stated mission. As she worked, she found herself thinking about Elena's excitement over the science fair project, about her daughter's natural curiosity and love of learning. Elena would be fascinated by this place, the sophisticated equipment, the engineering challenges, the puzzle of why so much advanced technology had been abandoned. In a different world, Elena might grow up to be like Dr. Mitchell, using her intelligence to solve complex problems and push the boundaries of human knowledge. The thought filled Maria with renewed determination. This job was more than just $800 in cash. It was a reminder that there were possibilities beyond their current circumstances, that intelligence and hard work could lead to meaningful careers that made a difference in the world. Elena deserved the chance to explore her potential without being limited by financial constraints or reduced opportunities. Every thorough photograph Maria took, every detail she documented professionally, was a step toward providing that chance. Maria continued her systematic documentation of the office complex, but her mind kept returning to the hidden elevator. The more she explored, the more she encountered evidence that Apex Manufacturing had been involved in research activities that went far beyond automotive parts production. Clean rooms with specialized air filtration systems, laboratories equipped for materials testing that required extreme precision, and storage areas with environmental controls, typically found in semiconductor or pharmaceutical facilities, rather than mechanical manufacturing operations. In Dr. Mitchell's filing cabinets, Maria discovered project folders labeled with cryptic designations like Project Resonance, Advanced Materials Initiative, and Dual Purpose Applications Research. The documents were mostly technical specifications and test results that Maria couldn't fully understand, but the federal contract numbers and Department of Defense letterheads suggested that Apex had been involved in classified government research alongside their commercial automotive work. One folder contained correspondence between Dr. Mitchell and officials at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, discussing successful integration of advanced materials into civilian applications and maintaining operational security while scaling and production. The revelation that Apex had been conducting classified research explained many of the facility's unusual features: the sophisticated security systems, the advanced ventilation and environmental controls, the areas marked for authorized personnel only. It also raised questions about why such valuable research operations had been abandoned so abruptly, and why the facility had remained unused for 5 years, instead of being converted to other high-tech applications or acquired by competitors. Interested in the advanced equipment and intellectual property, Maria photographed the relevant documents carefully, understanding that potential buyers would need to know about any ongoing government obligations or security requirements associated with the property. Classified research facilities often came with long-term monitoring requirements, environmental restrictions, or other complications that could affect their commercial value. She was beginning to understand why Clearwater Property Management was willing to pay $800 for a thorough assessment. This wasn't just a standard industrial property, but a complex site with unique challenges and opportunities. As afternoon shadows began lengthening across the manufacturing floor, Maria decided to explore the specialized storage areas Jennifer had mentioned. These turned out to be a series of basement-level rooms accessed through a separate entrance near the loading docks. The basement areas were climate-controlled and showed signs of recent maintenance despite the facility's abandonment. Fresh air filters, updated electrical panels, and security systems that appeared to be newer than the rest of the building's infrastructure. The storage rooms contained materials and equipment that clearly belonged to the classified research operations, rather than automotive manufacturing. Exotic metal alloys in carefully labeled containers, electronic components that looked more like spacecraft parts than car accessories, and testing equipment that could have come from a NASA laboratory. One room was filled with what appeared to be prototype components, mechanical assemblies that combined traditional automotive engineering with advanced materials and electronics in ways that suggested revolutionary improvements in performance and capability. Maria photographed everything systematically, making detailed notes about the apparent purpose and condition of each item. As someone who had spent her adult life struggling to afford basic necessities, she was awed by the casual display of technology that represented years of research investment and millions of dollars in development costs. Each prototype component probably cost more than she made in a year, yet here they sat abandoned and forgotten, while she worried about affording her daughter's school supplies and keeping their electricity connected. The contrast filled her with a mixture of frustration and motivation. Somewhere in the economic equations that governed American society, there was room for unlimited investment in advanced military technology and classified research, but no room for ensuring that single mothers could afford rent and medical care for their children. Elena's brilliant mind deserved the same kind of support and resources that had been lavished on these abandoned projects, but instead, she was limited by poverty to whatever educational opportunities Maria could scrape together through determination and sacrifice. But rather than dwelling on the unfairness, Maria channeled her emotions into professional focus. This job was an opportunity to demonstrate her capabilities, to prove that she could handle complex assessment work that required intelligence, attention to detail, and discretion. If she impressed Clearwater Property Management with her thoroughness and professionalism, it might lead to additional opportunities, other properties to assess, perhaps even regular contract work that could provide more stable income than her current combination of part-time jobs. Maria spent the remainder of the afternoon documenting the basement storage areas, working methodically through rooms filled with equipment and materials that told the story of ambitious research programs that had been interrupted rather than completed. Project files indicated that Apex had been developing advanced automotive technologies with potential military applications: lightweight armor systems, electromagnetic shielding, energy-efficient propulsion components that could revolutionize both civilian and defense vehicles. One project folder contained correspondence with Tesla, General Motors, and several aerospace contractors, discussing licensing agreements for technologies that Apex had developed under government contracts. The financial projections were staggering. Potential revenues in the hundreds of millions if the research could be successfully commercialized. Yet somehow, all of this valuable intellectual property and physical assets had been abandoned when the facility closed, left sitting in climate-controlled storage while the company's former employees struggled to find new jobs, and Maria worried about paying rent. As she worked through the final storage room, Maria discovered something that made her pause and reconsider everything she thought she understood about the facility. Hidden behind stacks of equipment crates, she found the same type of concealed entrance she'd encountered in Dr. Mitchell's office. Another bookshelf on tracks that could be moved aside to reveal what appeared to be an elevator access panel. This one was different, though, with a sophisticated electronic lock that required both a key card and a numeric code for access. The discovery of a second hidden elevator in a different part of the facility and secured with more advanced access controls suggested that Apex's classified research operations had included multiple levels of security and compartmentalization. Whatever was accessible through this particular elevator was considered more sensitive than the already classified material she'd been documenting in the storage areas. The existence of multiple concealed access points implied a facility within the facility, spaces that weren't shown on any architectural plans and might not be known to anyone except the highest levels of management and selected research personnel. Maria photographed the concealed entrance carefully, noting the type of electronic lock and the absence of any identifying markings that might indicate the manufacturer or programming requirements. She tried the keys Jennifer had provided, but none of them fit the manual override slot she could see beneath the electronic panel. Whatever lay beyond this elevator was secured against casual access, even by someone with general facility keys and authorization to conduct a comprehensive assessment. The discovery raised questions about the scope of her assignment and the extent of Jennifer's knowledge about the facility's true capabilities. Had Clearwater Property Management hired her to document a standard abandoned manufacturing facility, or were they aware of the classified research areas and deliberately seeking information about assets that might not be included in public records? The company's eagerness to hire her, the generous compensation, and the emphasis on thorough documentation began to seem less like good fortune and more like carefully orchestrated intelligence gathering. Maria's phone showed no signal, as Jennifer had warned, which meant she couldn't research Clearwater Property Management or verify their legitimacy without returning to an area with better cellular coverage. She was committed to completing the job. They needed the money too desperately for her to abandon the work based on suspicions that might be completely unfounded. But she resolved to be more cautious about what information she shared and how thoroughly she documented the more sensitive discoveries. As the winter daylight began fading, Maria completed her documentation of the accessible areas and prepared to leave for the day. She had systematically photographed and catalogued thousands of items, from massive manufacturing equipment to specialized research materials, creating a comprehensive record that would give potential buyers detailed information about the facility's assets and capabilities. The work had been more complex and intellectually engaging than she'd expected, requiring her to understand technical specifications and research applications that challenged her knowledge and forced her to think beyond her usual experience. The intellectual stimulation reminded Maria of her abandoned dreams of completing her nursing degree, of pursuing a career that would engage her mind and provide opportunities for growth and advancement. Before Carlos's death, she'd been 3 semesters away from graduation, maintaining a 3.8 GPA while working part-time and raising Elena. The courses had been challenging but rewarding, especially the sciences that required analytical thinking and problem-solving skills. She'd particularly enjoyed anatomy and physiology, understanding how complex systems work together to maintain life and health. Working in the Apex facility brought back memories of that intellectual excitement, the satisfaction of understanding complex information and making connections between different concepts. Elena had inherited that same love of learning, that natural curiosity about how things worked and why they mattered. Maybe this job could be the beginning of getting back on track toward goals that had been deferred but not abandoned. Finishing her degree, building a career that provided both financial stability and intellectual fulfillment, creating opportunities for Elena that weren't limited by their current circumstances. Maria locked the facility carefully, double-checking that all access points were secured according to Jennifer's instructions. The drive back to Millfield gave her time to process everything she'd discovered and plan her approach for the remaining 2 days of assessment work. Tomorrow, she would focus on the areas she hadn't been able to access today, including the spaces beyond the concealed elevators, if she could find a way to gain entry. She would also research Clearwater Property Management more thoroughly, using the library's internet connection, if necessary, to verify their legitimacy and understand their role in the property disposition process. Elena was waiting at the after-school program when Maria arrived for pickup, bursting with excitement about her day. "Mom, guess what? Mrs. Peterson said my volcano project idea was so good that she wants me to present it to the whole school science fair, not just our class. And she said, if I do really well, I might get to go to the regional competition in Hartford." Elena's enthusiasm was infectious, her face glowing with pride and anticipation. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Tell me all about your volcano project." Maria listened, as Elena described her plans for demonstrating different types of volcanic eruptions using baking soda reactions, food coloring to show lava flows, and a working model that would show how pressure builds up inside the Earth. The project required materials they couldn't afford and research Elena would need help conducting, but Maria found herself making mental calculations about how the $800 from the Apex assessment could cover not just their immediate needs, but also Elena's science fair materials, and perhaps even a trip to Hartford if she qualified for the regional competition. "I was thinking," Elena continued as they walked to the Honda that Maria had miraculously coaxed back to life with a jump start and a prayer, "maybe I could make my volcano project about how scientists study real volcanoes to help protect people. Like how they use special equipment to predict eruptions and warn everyone to evacuate safely. That would be helping people with science, just like you want to do when you become a nurse." Maria's heart swelled with love and pride for this remarkable child who somehow maintained optimism and big dreams despite all the challenges their circumstances presented. Elena deserved every opportunity to explore her scientific interests, to compete in regional competitions, to dream about careers that would let her use her intelligence to make a difference in the world. The work at Apex was more than just a job. It was a step toward providing those opportunities, toward building the foundation for a better future that Elena deserved. That evening, over dinner at their small kitchen table, Maria shared carefully edited stories about the abandoned facility while Elena worked on her homework. She described the sophisticated manufacturing equipment, the engineering offices filled with technical drawings, and the impressive scale of operations that had once employed hundreds of people. Elena was fascinated by the description of precision machinery and asked thoughtful questions about how automotive parts were designed and manufactured. "It sounds like the engineers who worked there were really smart," Elena observed, looking up from her math worksheet. "Do you think they were sad when the factory closed? Like sad that they couldn't keep working on their projects and helping make cars safer and better?" Maria considered the question seriously, thinking about Dr. Mitchell's office and the abandoned research that had represented years of intellectual effort and innovation. "I think they probably were sad," Maria replied. "When you work really hard on something important, it's disappointing when you can't see it through to completion. But maybe some of those engineers went on to other places where they could continue their work. Or maybe they used what they learned to start new projects that help people in different ways." She helped Elena with a particularly challenging word problem, working through the steps together until Elena's face lit up with understanding. After Elena went to bed, Maria spent the evening researching Clearwater property management using her laptop's spotty internet connection. What she found was professionally reassuring. The company appeared to be legitimate, with proper business registrations and a track record of handling commercial property dispositions throughout New England. Their website showcased successful facility assessments and property sales, including several former manufacturing sites that had been converted to new industrial uses or redeveloped for commercial purposes. However, Maria noticed that many of Clearwater's previous projects involved facilities with government connections, former defense contractors, research facilities that had conducted classified work, properties with complex environmental or security considerations that required specialized expertise. The pattern suggested that Clearwater specialized in properties that presented unique challenges, which explained their willingness to pay premium rates for thorough assessment work, and their emphasis on discretion and independent operation. The research also revealed that the Apex manufacturing site was listed for sale at $12 million, a figure that surprised Maria given the apparent value of the equipment and research assets she'd documented. Either the listing price reflected significant hidden complications, or potential buyers weren't aware of the full scope of valuable assets that remained in the facility. Her assessment work might be more important than she'd realized, potentially identifying millions of dollars in overlooked equipment and intellectual property that could dramatically affect the property's value and marketability. Maria prepared for bed with a mixture of exhaustion and anticipation, looking forward to continuing her exploration of the facility while hoping to solve some of the mysteries she'd encountered on the first day. The hidden elevators particularly intrigued her, representing access to areas that might contain the most valuable research equipment and materials. If she could find a way to document those spaces, her assessment might provide information that would significantly benefit potential buyers and justify Clearwater's investment in comprehensive evaluation. As she fell asleep, Maria found herself thinking about possibilities that extended beyond the immediate $800 payment. If this job led to additional contract work with Clearwater, if her assessment proved valuable enough to establish her reputation for handling complex properties, maybe she could build a new career that provided both financial stability and intellectual satisfaction. Maybe Elena's science fair project could be just the beginning of opportunities that would let both of them pursue their dreams without being limited by circumstances they couldn't control. The Apex facility held secrets that someone had gone to considerable trouble to hide, but Maria was determined to uncover them professionally and thoroughly. Whatever lay beyond those concealed elevators, whatever research had been deemed too sensitive for public knowledge, she would document it, all with the same systematic care she brought to every aspect of her life. Elena deserved a mother who didn't give up when faced with challenges, who found ways to turn obstacles into opportunities, who understood that success required both courage and persistence. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries, new questions, and hopefully new answers about what Apex Manufacturing had really been developing in their classified research programs. Maria fell asleep, planning her approach to the concealed areas, determined to earn every dollar of her payment while positioning herself for whatever opportunities might follow, from proving her capabilities with complex, sensitive assessment work. Maria arrived at the Apex facility early the second morning, determined to solve the mystery of the concealed elevators that had dominated her thoughts through a restless night. She'd stopped at the public library before dawn, using their high-speed internet to research building codes and industrial facility requirements that might explain the hidden access points. What she discovered was both enlightening and concerning. Facilities conducting classified research often included emergency evacuation routes, secure communication centers, and specialized storage areas that weren't reflected in standard architectural plans. The concealed elevators likely provided access to levels that existed outside normal building documentation, spaces designed for maximum security and compartmentalization. Elena had been particularly excited at breakfast, chattering about her volcano project, while Maria helped her organize school supplies and pack lunch. Mrs. Peterson said I can stay after school today to work on my research in the computer lab, Elena announced proudly. She's going to help me find information about Mount Vesuvius and how scientists today use satellites to monitor volcanic activity around the world. Maria's heart swelled with pride, watching Elena's intellectual curiosity flourish despite their financial constraints. Elena deserved access to every educational opportunity, every chance to explore her scientific interests, every possibility to develop her remarkable mind without being limited by circumstances beyond her control. The motivation to provide Elena with those opportunities drove Maria's determination to excel at this assessment job and position herself for additional contract work that could transform their economic situation. $800 was just the beginning. if she proved her value to Clearwater Property Management by uncovering information that other assessors had missed, if she demonstrated professionalism and discretion with sensitive materials, she might build a reputation that led to regular work with properties requiring specialized expertise. The technical complexity of the Apex facility was actually an advantage, allowing her to showcase analytical skills and attention to detail that distinguished her from contractors who only documented obvious assets. Maria began the second day by systematically testing the concealed elevator in Dr. Mitchell's office, examining the mechanism that allowed the bookshelf to slide aside and searching for alternative activation methods. The tracks were engineered with precision, suggesting frequent use rather than emergency-only access. Behind the bookshelf, she discovered a small control panel with both electronic and manual override options. The electronic system required credentials she didn't possess, but the manual override used a standard utility key that matched one on Jennifer's keyring. The elevator interior was surprisingly sophisticated. Stainless steel walls, digital floor indicators, and access card readers that suggested multiple levels of security clearance were required for different destinations. The control panel showed 5 basement levels, numbered B1 through B5, with additional designations that used letter codes rather than numbers. Maria selected B1, the first basement level, reasoning that it would likely contain the least sensitive areas and provide orientation for understanding the facility's hidden layout. The elevator descended smoothly and quietly, far deeper than the storage areas she'd explored the previous day. When the doors opened, Maria stepped into a corridor that looked more like a government facility than a commercial manufacturing building. The walls were painted institutional grey, with posted security notices and emergency procedures that referenced classified materials handling and personnel clearance verification. Fluorescent lighting hummed softly overhead, and the air circulation system created a subtle positive pressure that indicated sophisticated environmental controls designed to prevent contamination or unauthorized access. B1 contained what appeared to be expanded laboratory facilities, chemistry labs with fume hoods and specialized ventilation, materials testing stations with equipment that looked like it belonged in a university research facility, and clean rooms that maintained sterile environments for sensitive manufacturing processes. Unlike the abandoned appearance of the upper levels, these spaces showed signs of recent activity. Equipment was clean and properly maintained. Computers displayed standby screens rather than dust-covered keyboards, and chemical storage areas were organized with current inventory labels and expiration dates. Maria photographed everything systematically, while trying to understand why these facilities appeared to be maintained despite the supposed closure of Apex Manufacturing 5 years earlier. The laboratory equipment was cutting-edge, representing millions of dollars in research investment that would be extremely valuable to companies or institutions conducting advanced materials research. Mass spectrometers, electron microscopes, X-ray crystallography systems, instruments that universities and corporations would pay enormous sums to acquire, yet here they sat apparently abandoned in a supposedly defunct facility. In the materials testing lab, Maria discovered project files that revealed the true scope of Apex's classified research operations. Project Resonance involved developing metamaterials with electromagnetic properties that could make objects effectively invisible to radar and other detection systems. The applications were obviously military, stealth technology for aircraft and vehicles, but the research notes indicated potential civilian uses in telecommunications and medical imaging that could revolutionize multiple industries. Project Phantom focused on lightweight armor systems that combined advanced ceramics with electromagnetic shielding to provide protection against both physical projectiles and electronic warfare attacks. The test results were extraordinary. Armor plates that weighed 70% less than conventional materials, while providing superior protection against sophisticated weapons systems. The commercial applications for law enforcement, private security, and even civilian emergency responders could create markets worth billions of dollars. Most intriguing was Project Mirror, which appeared to involve consciousness interface technology that could translate human thoughts into direct control of mechanical systems. The research files described successful experiments with test subjects controlling robotic systems through neural implants that interpreted brain activity patterns. The military applications were obvious. Pilots could control aircraft through thought alone. Soldiers could operate weapons systems with unprecedented speed and accuracy. But the civilian potential for assisting paralyzed individuals or enhancing human capabilities was equally revolutionary. As Maria documented the research files, she began to understand why Apex Manufacturing had been closed so abruptly and why these facilities remained maintained despite the company's apparent dissolution. The technologies being developed here represented strategic military advantages that could shift the balance of global power. If foreign governments or non-state actors gained access to metamaterial stealth technology, advanced armor systems, or consciousness interface capabilities, the national security implications would be catastrophic. The facility hadn't been abandoned. It had been placed in protected status, maintained by government agencies, while decisions were made about how to continue the research or transfer it to other organizations. The assessment work she was conducting for Clearwater Property Management might be part of a process to transition the facility to new operators while maintaining security over the classified technologies. Her systematic documentation could be providing information that would help determine which assets could be sold commercially and which required continued government oversight. The realization that she was documenting technologies that could reshape modern warfare and civilian life filled Maria with a mixture of awe and responsibility. Elena's generation would inherit a world transformed by these innovations, medical implants that restored mobility to paralyzed individuals, materials that made vehicles safer and more efficient, communication systems that enhanced human capabilities in ways currently unimaginable. The research conducted in these underground laboratories could improve millions of lives, but only if it was developed responsibly and made accessible to people who needed it, rather than being restricted to military applications or corporate profit maximization. Maria continued to level B2, which contained manufacturing facilities that produced prototype components using the advanced materials developed in the research labs above. The equipment here was beyond sophisticated. 3D printers that could create complex structures at the molecular level, assembly systems that integrated electronic components into metamaterial matrices, testing chambers that could simulate extreme environmental conditions to verify component performance. Everything was automated and computer-controlled, requiring minimal human intervention once production parameters were established. The prototype components stored in B2 represented years of research, investment, and development work. Armor plates that felt impossibly light, yet demonstrated resistance to high-velocity impacts that would destroy conventional materials. Electronic components that could process information at speeds that exceeded anything Maria had heard about. In commercial technology, communication devices that appeared to translate thoughts directly into digital signals without requiring traditional input methods. In the secure storage area, Maria discovered what appeared to be complete systems rather than individual components, suits of armor that looked like something from science fiction movies, but with technical documentation proving they were functional prototypes rather than conceptual designs. The armor provided complete environmental protection while enhancing the wearer's strength, speed, and sensory capabilities through integrated electronic systems. Test reports indicated that wearers could lift weights that would be impossible for unassisted humans, move at speeds that exceeded Olympic athletes, and perceive electromagnetic radiation across spectrums invisible to normal human vision. The implications for emergency responders were staggering. Firefighters could enter burning buildings with complete protection from heat and smoke, while having enhanced strength to carry victims to safety. Rescue workers could operate in toxic environments or collapsed structures with capabilities that would save lives currently beyond human reach. But the military applications were equally obvious, and Maria understood why such technology would be classified and controlled rather than being made available for civilian use. As she photographed the prototype systems, Maria thought about Elena's science fair project and her daughter's dreams of using science to help people. The technologies developed in this facility represented the kind of breakthrough innovations that Elena might work on someday if she had opportunities to pursue advanced education in science and engineering. But those opportunities depended on Maria's ability to provide educational stability and financial resources that were currently beyond their reach. Level B3 contained what appeared to be command and control facilities, communication centers, with equipment that could maintain contact with military units anywhere in the world, computer systems that could process and analyze vast amounts of intelligence data, and coordination centers that looked like they belonged in Pentagon situation, rooms rather than commercial manufacturing facilities. The sophistication suggested that Apex had been more than a research and development contractor. They had been providing operational support for military missions that required the technologies they were developing. The communication equipment was still active, with screens displaying current information feeds and global monitoring systems that tracked everything from satellite positions to weather patterns that could affect military operations. Maria realized she was looking at a facility that remained operational despite its apparent abandonment, possibly serving as a backup command center for government agencies that needed secure communication capabilities independent of main Pentagon facilities. One computer terminal displayed files labeled active deployments with references to locations around the world where prototype systems were apparently being field tested. The information was beyond classified, operational details that could compromise ongoing missions if disclosed to unauthorized personnel. Maria photographed the systems without accessing specific files, understanding that her job was to document assets rather than to examine sensitive information that could affect national security. The discovery that the facility remained operationally active rather than truly abandoned changed her understanding of the assessment work completely. Clearwater Property Management wasn't evaluating a defunct manufacturing site. They were conducting inventory of a classified government facility that was being transitioned to new operational status. Her documentation was providing information that would help decide which assets could be transferred, which required continued security oversight, and which might be made available for civilian applications. Level B4 housed what appeared to be testing facilities for human subjects, medical examination rooms, psychological evaluation centers, and training simulators that prepared individuals to use the advanced technologies developed in the upper levels. The facilities were designed for long-term studies that monitored how human operators adapted to consciousness interface systems, how prolonged use of enhanced armor affected physical and mental health, and how exposure to electromagnetic metamaterials influenced biological functions. Medical files indicated that test subjects had been volunteers from military special operations units who understood the experimental nature of the technologies and accepted risks associated with cutting-edge research. The results were extraordinary. Subjects demonstrated dramatically enhanced physical capabilities, improved cognitive processing, and adaptation to technological augmentation that exceeded all theoretical predictions. But the studies also revealed concerns about long-term effects that weren't fully understood, psychological impacts of enhanced capabilities, and ethical questions about human enhancement that had no clear answers. Maria realized she was documenting research that pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be human, technologies that could fundamentally alter human capabilities and potentially create new categories of enhanced individuals. The implications for society were staggering. Economic systems based on current human limitations would become obsolete. Social structures would need to adapt to people with dramatically different capabilities, and ethical frameworks would require complete revision to address enhancement technologies that could create permanent divisions between enhanced and unenhanced populations. The final level, B5, contained archives that documented the complete history of classified research programs. Dating back decades, files showed that Apex Manufacturing had been conducting advanced research since the 1980s, developing technologies that were gradually declassified and transferred to civilian applications, while more advanced capabilities remained under government control. Technologies that now seem commonplace, GPS systems, internet protocols, advanced materials used in commercial products, had originated in classified programs similar to the current projects. The archives revealed a systematic process for transitioning military technologies to civilian use once their strategic advantages were replaced by more advanced capabilities. Project files showed how stealth materials developed for military aircraft had eventually been adapted for commercial vehicles, how encryption technologies created for secure military communications had been modified for civilian internet security, and how medical technologies developed for treating combat injuries had revolutionized civilian healthcare. Maria understood that she was documenting the next generation of technologies that would eventually transform civilian life in ways currently unimaginable. Elena's generation would grow up with capabilities that seemed like magic today. Direct, neural interfaces with computers, materials that could change properties in response to environmental conditions, and communication systems that transcended current limitations of human biology. The research conducted in this facility was creating the foundation for a future where human potential would be limited only by imagination and ethical considerations rather than biological constraints. The scope of what she discovered was overwhelming, but Maria felt a profound sense of purpose in documenting it professionally and thoroughly. Someone needed to create a complete record of these assets and capabilities to ensure that decisions about their future were made with full understanding of their potential benefits and risks. Her assessment work was contributing to processes that would determine whether these technologies remained restricted to military applications or were developed for civilian use that could improve millions of lives. As Maria completed her documentation of the underground levels and prepared to return to the surface, she received an unexpected message on the elevator's internal communication system. "Ms. Santos, this is Dr. Sarah Mitchell. I believe you've been exploring my former workplace. Would you be willing to meet with me? I'm currently in the main conference room on the first floor, and I have information that might help you understand what you've discovered." The message was both startling and intriguing. Dr. Mitchell, whose office had led Maria to discover the concealed elevator system, was apparently in the facility and wanted to discuss her findings. Maria's first instinct was caution. She'd been hired to conduct an assessment, not to meet with former employees who might have their own agendas regarding the facility's future. But her curiosity about the research programs and their implications overcame her reservations. Dr. Mitchell could provide context that would help her understand the significance of what she'd documented and the potential applications of the technologies she'd discovered. Maria rode the elevator back to the main level, her mind racing with questions about Dr. Mitchell's presence in the facility and her knowledge of the assessment work. The conference room was located in the administrative section, and Maria found Dr. Mitchell waiting with coffee and a warm smile that immediately put her at ease. In person, Dr. Mitchell appeared younger than her photographs suggested, with an energetic presence that conveyed both intelligence and genuine concern for others. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Dr. Mitchell began. "I know this situation must seem unusual, but I wanted to ensure you understood the significance of what you've discovered and the potential implications for your safety and that of your daughter." The mention of Elena immediately captured Maria's attention and concern. Dr. Mitchell continued, "The work we conducted here represents breakthrough technologies that could transform society, but there are interests that would prefer to see these capabilities remain restricted or disappear entirely. Your documentation work has been observed by multiple parties, and you may find yourself in a position where knowledge becomes both opportunity and danger." Dr. Mitchell's words sent a chill through Maria, but also sparked a fierce protective instinct that had carried her through 4 years of single motherhood and countless financial crises. "What kind of danger are we talking about?" Maria asked directly, setting down her coffee cup and focusing completely on the conversation. "And how do you know about Elena?" Dr. Mitchell's expression grew serious as she pulled out a tablet and showed Maria surveillance footage of her arriving at the facility, documenting equipment and exploring the underground levels. "Multiple intelligence agencies monitor this facility continuously," Dr. Mitchell explained. "Your systematic documentation has been observed and analyzed by people who understand the strategic value of what you've discovered. Some view your work as helpful to legitimate transition processes, while others see it as a potential security breach that needs to be contained." She swiped to show additional footage of vehicles positioned at various points around the facility. "Perimeter. You're not just conducting a property assessment, Maria. You're participating in a carefully orchestrated intelligence operation that will determine the future of technologies that could reshape global power balances." The revelation that she'd unknowingly become part of an intelligence operation was terrifying, but Maria found herself thinking about Elena's excitement over her science fair project, about her daughter's dreams of using science to help people, about the possibilities these technologies could create for making the world better rather than just different. "Dr. Mitchell, I need to understand something. Are these technologies being developed to help people or to harm them? Because everything I've seen down there could revolutionize medicine, emergency response, and human capabilities in ways that could improve millions of lives." Dr. Mitchell smiled for the first time since the conversation began. "That's exactly the right question, and it's why I wanted to speak with you. The research we conducted here was always intended to benefit humanity, but military applications provided the funding and security necessary to develop capabilities that seemed impossible just decades ago." She activated the tablet to show design schematics that illustrated civilian applications for each technology. Neural interface systems could restore mobility to paralyzed individuals and allow direct communication for people with severe disabilities. Advanced materials could make vehicles safer, buildings more resilient, and medical devices more effective. The metamaterial research could lead to communication systems that connect people across any distance instantaneously. Maria studied the civilian application designs, recognizing innovations that could transform Elena's generation in ways that expanded human potential rather than just creating new weapons. Children with learning disabilities could access educational systems that adapted to their specific cognitive patterns. Medical patients could receive treatments that were tailored to their individual biological characteristics. emergency responders could save lives in situations that were currently beyond human capability. The same technologies that enabled military superiority could democratize human enhancement and create opportunities for people to overcome limitations that had previously been considered permanent. The question, Dr. Mitchell continued, is whether these technologies will be restricted to military and corporate applications that serve narrow interests, or whether they'll be developed transparently for civilian use that benefits society broadly. She showed Maria documentation of international technology transfer agreements that were being negotiated by various government agencies. Your assessment work is providing information that will influence those decisions. Detailed documentation of existing capabilities helps policymakers understand what's possible and what safeguards are necessary for responsible development. Maria realized that her systematic photography and cataloging wasn't just earning $800. It was contributing to decisions that would affect Elena's entire generation and beyond. The thoroughness of her documentation could help ensure that breakthrough technologies were developed responsibly rather than being restricted or misused. Every technical specification she recorded, every prototype system she photographed, every research file she catalogued was providing evidence that these capabilities existed and could be adapted for civilian benefit rather than remaining classified indefinitely. "What do you need from me?" Maria asked, understanding that Dr. Mitchell's presence wasn't coincidental and that this conversation was leading toward a request that would go beyond simple property assessment. Dr. Mitchell's expression grew more intense as she explained the situation that had brought them together. "The official assessment you're conducting will result in a sanitized report that focuses on conventional assets while minimizing discussion of classified capabilities. But there are people within the government who believe these technologies should be transitioned to civilian applications that could benefit society rather than being restricted to military use indefinitely." Dr. Mitchell activated a secure communication device and showed Maria encrypted files that contained complete technical specifications for the civilian applications of every technology she'd discovered in the underground levels. "We need someone with your systematic approach and attention to detail to document these civilian applications thoroughly, creating a comprehensive record that demonstrates their potential benefits and safety considerations." She paused meaningfully. "This documentation would be provided to congressional oversight committees, international development organizations, and civilian research institutions that could develop these technologies responsibly." The scope of what Dr. Mitchell was proposing was staggering. Maria would essentially be conducting parallel documentation that could influence global technology policy and determine whether breakthrough capabilities remained restricted or were developed for civilian benefit. The work would require additional time at the facility, careful coordination with Dr. Mitchell's team, and acceptance of personal risks that could affect both her and Elena's safety. But it would also position her as a key contributor to decisions that could improve millions of lives and create opportunities for Elena's generation that didn't currently exist. Maria thought about Elena's volcano project, about her daughter's natural curiosity and desire to use science to help people, about the educational opportunities Elena deserved, but that their financial circumstances made difficult to provide. The additional documentation work would pay significantly more than the original assessment. Dr. Mitchell mentioned compensation of $5,000 for the expanded scope, but more importantly, it would give Maria the chance to contribute to something larger than her immediate circumstances, to help ensure that revolutionary technologies served human flourishing rather than just military dominance. "I'll do it," Maria said simply, understanding that some opportunities were too important to let pass, regardless of the personal risks involved. Dr. Mitchell's relief was evident as she activated additional communication systems and began coordinating with her team. Within minutes, the conference room had been transformed into a secure briefing center, where Maria received detailed instructions about documenting civilian applications, safety protocols for handling sensitive information, and communication procedures that would protect both her and Elena throughout the expanded assessment work. The civilian application documentation required Maria to work with Dr. Mitchell's team of former Apex researchers who had remained committed to transitioning their work to beneficial civilian use despite the facility's official closure. Dr. Rebecca Torres, a biomedical engineer who had developed the neural interface systems, explained how the same technologies that allowed military operators to control weapons through thought could enable paralyzed individuals to operate wheelchairs, computers, and prosthetic limbs with unprecedented precision and natural responsiveness. We've conducted preliminary trials with volunteer patients who have spinal cord injuries, Dr. Torres explained, as she showed Maria test footage of paralyzed individuals using neural interfaces to control robotic limbs with remarkable dexterity. The results exceeded our most optimistic projections. Patients could perform complex tasks like writing, cooking, and even playing musical instruments using thought-controlled prosthetics. The implications for improving quality of life for millions of people with disabilities were extraordinary, but the technology had remained classified because of its military applications. Dr. James Chen, who had led the advanced materials research, demonstrated how metamaterials could be adapted for civilian infrastructure that would be more resilient, efficient, and sustainable than anything currently available. Building materials that could adapt their properties in response to weather conditions, making structures more comfortable and energy efficient. Transportation systems that could reduce fuel consumption, while improving safety through materials that absorbed impact energy and distributed forces more effectively than conventional designs. The environmental benefits alone could help address climate change challenges, Dr. Chen explained, as he showed Maria prototypes of building components that could generate energy from ambient electromagnetic radiation while providing superior insulation and structural strength. Widespread adoption of these materials could reduce energy consumption for heating and cooling by 70%, while making buildings safer during earthquakes, hurricanes, and other natural disasters. Maria documented everything systematically, understanding that her photography and technical notes were creating a comprehensive record that could support policy decisions about technology transition and civilian development. Each prototype component she recorded, each test result she catalogued, each application demonstration she photographed, was providing evidence that these capabilities could improve people's lives rather than just creating new forms of warfare. The work was intellectually demanding in ways that reminded Maria of her interrupted nursing studies, requiring her to understand complex technical concepts and their practical applications while maintaining the detailed accuracy necessary for scientific documentation. Dr. Mitchell's team treated her as a valued colleague rather than just a contractor, explaining concepts patiently and encouraging her questions about applications she didn't immediately understand. As Maria worked through the civilian application documentation, she found herself thinking about Elena's future in ways that extended beyond their immediate financial struggles. The technologies being developed here could create economic opportunities for Elena's generation that didn't exist today. Careers in human enhancement research, biomedical engineering, advanced materials development, and consciousness interface design that would require the kind of scientific education Elena was already demonstrating interest in pursuing. But more importantly, these technologies could create a world where human potential wasn't limited by biological constraints or economic circumstances that prevented people from accessing enhancement capabilities. Elena could grow up in a society where learning disabilities could be compensated through neural interfaces, where physical limitations could be overcome through advanced prosthetics, where communication barriers could be eliminated through direct consciousness interface technologies. The expanded documentation work required 3 additional days at the facility, during which Maria worked closely with Dr. Mitchell's team to create comprehensive records that would support responsible civilian development of breakthrough technologies. The process was like conducting graduate-level research while being paid for work that could influence global technology policy. An opportunity that combined intellectual engagement with financial compensation in ways Maria had never imagined possible. Elena's excitement about her volcano science fair project provided daily motivation for Maria's work at the facility. Each evening, Elena would share her research progress, while Maria helped with homework and listened to detailed explanations of volcanic activity, plate tectonics, and geological monitoring systems that scientists use to predict eruptions and protect communities. Elena's natural curiosity and analytical thinking reminded Maria daily of why the civilian applications of advanced technologies were so important. Children like Elena deserved opportunities to develop their potential without being limited by circumstances they couldn't control. Mom, did you know that scientists can use satellites to detect tiny changes in the ground around volcanoes that might mean an eruption is coming? Elena asked excitedly during dinner after her 3rd day of research. They can warn people days or even weeks before it happens, so everyone can evacuate safely. That's using science to save lives. Maria smiled at Elena's enthusiasm while thinking about the neural interface technologies that could give scientists even better tools for monitoring natural disasters and coordinating emergency responses. On the final day of documentation work, Dr. Mitchell arranged for Maria to meet with congressional staff members who were responsible for oversight of classified technology transition programs. The meeting was held in a secure conference facility in Hartford, where Maria presented her documentation to representatives who would influence policy decisions about civilian development of the technologies she'd discovered. Representative Sarah Williams, who chaired the House Subcommittee on Emerging Technologies, reviewed Maria's documentation with evident interest and appreciation for its thoroughness. This level of detailed analysis is exactly what we need to make informed decisions about technology transition, Representative Williams explained. Your work provides the kind of comprehensive assessment that helps us understand both the potential benefits and the safeguards necessary for responsible civilian development. The congressional briefing led to Maria being invited to participate in ongoing policy discussions about technology transition, with compensation that would provide financial stability while she completed her nursing degree and built expertise in biomedical applications of advanced technologies. The opportunity was transformational, regular consulting work that paid well while allowing her to contribute to decisions that could improve millions of lives, combined with educational support that would help her complete her degree and build a career that served both her family's needs and her desire to help others. 6 months later, Maria stood before a joint congressional committee to testify about the civilian applications of classified technologies, wearing professional attire that Elena had helped her select, and carrying documentation that had influenced landmark legislation requiring transparent development of government-funded research for civilian benefit. The Technology Transition Transparency Act, passed largely based on evidence Maria had provided, mandated that breakthrough technologies developed with public funding be evaluated for civilian applications that could benefit society broadly rather than remaining restricted to military use indefinitely. Elena sat in the gallery watching her mother testify, no longer the 8-year-old worried about science fair supplies, but a confident 9-year-old whose volcano project had won regional competition and earned her a scholarship to a summer science program at Yale University. Elena's success wasn't just the result of her natural intelligence and curiosity. It was the product of having opportunities that were made possible by Maria's courage in documenting technologies that powerful interests had preferred to keep hidden. The question before this committee, Maria testified, looking directly at the representatives who would vote on funding for civilian technology development, is whether breakthrough capabilities will serve narrow interests or whether they'll be developed transparently to benefit the society that funded their creation through tax dollars and public support. She presented documentation showing how civilian applications of advanced technologies could address challenges in healthcare, education, emergency response, and infrastructure that affected millions of Americans daily. My daughter Elena dreams of becoming a scientist who uses advanced technologies to help people prepare for natural disasters and respond to emergencies more effectively, Maria continued, her voice carrying the conviction that had sustained her through years of financial struggle and months of complex documentation work. The technologies we've developed through classified research programs could make her dreams reality, but only if we choose to develop them for civilian benefit rather than keeping them restricted to military applications that serve limited purposes. The committee voted unanimously to fund civilian development programs based on Maria's documentation, appropriating $2 billion for research initiatives that would transition classified technologies to civilian applications over the following 5 years. The legislation included provisions for public oversight, ethical review, and equitable access that would ensure advanced capabilities were developed to benefit society broadly, rather than creating advantages only for those who could afford premium access. Maria's testimony was covered extensively by media outlets that portrayed her as an ordinary citizen whose systematic documentation had revealed extraordinary possibilities for improving human life through responsible technology development. Interview requests flooded in from news organizations, universities, and technology companies that wanted to discuss the implications of transitioning classified capabilities to civilian use. But Maria remained focused on completing her nursing degree while consulting on technology transition policy and raising Elena to believe that science could indeed be used to help people. Elena's science fair project had evolved into a comprehensive presentation about volcanic monitoring systems that incorporated advanced materials and communication technologies to improve early warning capabilities and emergency response coordination. Her work attracted attention from college admissions counselors who recognized exceptional potential and offered Elena opportunities to participate in advanced research programs that would prepare her for careers in emergency management, geological monitoring, and disaster response coordination. The abandoned Apex manufacturing facility was converted into a civilian research center, where former military technologies were adapted for medical applications, educational systems, and infrastructure improvements that benefited communities. Throughout Connecticut and beyond, Dr. Mitchell became the center's director, overseeing research programs that employed hundreds of scientists and engineers who were committed to developing breakthrough technologies for civilian benefit rather than military advantage. Maria completed her nursing degree while working as a consultant on biomedical applications of advanced technologies, specializing in neural interface systems that helped patients with disabilities regain capabilities they had lost through injury or illness. Her work combined her nursing background with technical expertise gained through documenting classified research, creating a unique career that provided both financial stability and the satisfaction of helping people overcome challenges that had previously seemed insurmountable. 3 years after discovering the hidden elevator in Dr. Mitchell's office, Maria received the Presidential Medal of Freedom for her contributions to technology transition policy and civilian development. Of breakthrough capabilities, Elena, now 12, and already enrolled in advanced science courses at a prestigious academy, watched proudly as her mother received recognition for courage in documenting technologies that had been hidden from public knowledge and advocacy for their development to benefit society rather than serving only military purposes. "My mother taught me that science should help people," Elena said during her acceptance speech for the National Youth Science Award she received for her ongoing research into disaster preparedness and emergency response systems. "She showed me that ordinary people can make extraordinary contributions when they have courage to document truth and advocate for its responsible use to benefit others." Elena's research had evolved to incorporate advanced technologies her mother had helped transition to civilian use, creating monitoring systems that could predict natural disasters with unprecedented accuracy and coordinate response efforts that saved lives. The speech Elena gave that day was broadcast internationally, inspiring young people around the world to pursue careers in science and technology that focused on helping others rather than just advancing theoretical knowledge or creating commercial products. Elena's message that science is only as valuable as its contribution to human flourishing became a rallying cry for students who wanted to develop breakthrough technologies for civilian benefit rather than military applications or corporate profit maximization. Maria's story was taught in policy schools and technology programs as an example of how individual courage and systematic documentation could influence global technology development and ensure that breakthrough capabilities served public benefit rather than remaining restricted to narrow interests. Her approach to documenting classified technologies became a model for transparency advocacy that balanced national security considerations with public interest in accessing capabilities that could improve millions of lives. The financial struggles that had driven Maria to accept the original assessment job at Apex Manufacturing seemed like distant memories. But she never forgot the desperation that had motivated her initial decision to explore an abandoned facility for $800 in cash. Elena's college education was fully funded through scholarships and research grants. Their home was comfortable without being extravagant, and Maria's consulting work provided both intellectual satisfaction and economic security that allowed them to focus on contributing to technology development rather than worrying about basic survival. But more importantly, Maria and Elena had discovered that ordinary people could influence extraordinary developments when they combined systematic documentation with courage to advocate for responsible use of breakthrough technologies. Elena's generation was inheriting a world where neural interfaces could restore capabilities to disabled individuals, where advanced materials could make infrastructure more resilient and sustainable, where communication technologies could connect people across any distance instantaneously. The hidden elevator that had led Maria into classified research facilities had ultimately opened pathways to a future where human potential was expanded rather than just human destructive capability, where breakthrough technologies served civilian benefit rather than remaining restricted to military applications, where Elena could pursue scientific careers that combined cutting-edge research with humanitarian goals that improved people's lives rather than just advancing theoretical knowledge. Standing in the civilian research center that had been created from the former Apex manufacturing facility, watching Elena work alongside Dr. Mitchell's team on disaster prediction systems that incorporated technologies Maria had helped transition to civilian use. Maria understood that their story was really about the power of systematic documentation and advocacy to ensure that breakthrough capabilities served human flourishing, rather than narrow interests that kept revolutionary technologies hidden from the people whose lives they could improve. 5 years after Elena received the National Youth Science Award, she stood before the United Nations General Assembly as the youngest person ever invited to address world leaders about technological solutions to global challenges. At 17, Elena had already published groundbreaking research on predictive disaster management systems and held patents on communication technologies that could coordinate international emergency response efforts with unprecedented efficiency. Her presentation to the UN focused on how advanced technologies could address climate change, natural disasters, and humanitarian crises through coordinated global implementation of civilian applications derived from formally classified research programs. Honorable delegates, Elena began, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had grown up understanding that science could change the world for the better. The technologies my mother helped bring to civilian use 5 years ago have already saved over 200,000 lives through improved disaster prediction and emergency response coordination. She activated a holographic display that showed real-time global monitoring systems detecting earthquake precursors, volcanic activity, and severe weather patterns weeks before traditional methods could identify potential threats. Maria watched from the gallery with tears of pride, remembering the 8-year-old who had been excited about a simple volcano science fair project and seeing the accomplished young scientist who was now proposing solutions to challenges that affected billions of people worldwide. Elena's research had evolved far beyond disaster prediction to encompass comprehensive planetary monitoring systems that could help humanity adapt to climate change while protecting vulnerable populations from its most severe effects. The neural interface technologies that Maria had documented in the underground levels of Apex manufacturing had been refined and democratized through Elena's research initiatives, becoming accessible to anyone who needed enhanced cognitive or physical capabilities, rather than being restricted to military applications or expensive medical procedures. Elena's team had developed simplified interface systems that could be manufactured at low cost and distributed globally through humanitarian organizations, giving disabled individuals in developing countries access to the same enhancement technologies available in wealthy nations. We have eliminated the digital divide, Elena continued, showing footage of students in rural Africa using neural interfaces to access educational systems that adapted to their individual learning patterns and cultural contexts. Advanced communication technologies allow direct knowledge transfer between teachers and students, regardless of language barriers or geographic separation. The implications for global education were revolutionary. Children in the most remote regions could receive the same quality instruction as students in prestigious universities, while maintaining their cultural identities and contributing their unique perspectives to global knowledge networks. Dr. Mitchell, now serving as Elena's research mentor and collaborator, had established civilian research centers on every continent, where formerly classified technologies were being adapted for local needs and challenges. The metamaterial research that had originally been developed for military stealth applications was now being used to create building materials that could withstand hurricanes, earthquakes, and flooding, while generating renewable energy from ambient electromagnetic radiation. Entire communities were being constructed using these advanced materials, providing safe housing and sustainable energy for millions of people who had previously lacked access to either. Maria's consulting work had evolved into directing the Global Technology Transition Institute, an organization that identified, classified research programs with civilian applications and advocated for their responsible development to benefit humanity. Her systematic approach to documenting breakthrough technologies had been refined into standardized procedures used by transparency advocates worldwide, ensuring that government-funded research served public benefit rather than remaining restricted to narrow military or corporate interests. The financial transformation of Maria's circumstances had been dramatic, but not the most important change in their lives. Elena's education was funded through research grants and international fellowships that recognized her contributions to humanitarian technology development. Their home was comfortable and equipped with advanced systems that Elena had helped design, but Maria had insisted on maintaining connection to their community in Millfield, where she funded educational programs that gave other struggling families opportunities to access advanced technologies and pursue careers in scientific fields. Elena's research team included young scientists from around the world who had been identified through global talent programs that used neural interface assessment systems to discover exceptional capabilities regardless of economic circumstances or geographic location. Brilliant minds that might have been overlooked due to poverty, language barriers, or lack of educational opportunities were now contributing to breakthrough research that addressed the most pressing challenges facing humanity. The consciousness interface technologies that allow direct thought communication have eliminated barriers between different cultures and belief systems, Elena explained to the UN delegates, demonstrating how researchers from different continents could collaborate in real time through shared virtual environments that translated not just language, but cultural concepts and emotional contexts. Scientific collaboration now operates at the speed of thought, rather than being limited by traditional communication methods that create misunderstandings and delays. The audience of world leaders watched in amazement as Elena's presentation showcased technologies that seemed like science fiction, but were already being implemented in pilot programs across 6 continents. Medical applications of advanced materials were regenerating damaged organs and neural pathways, restoring sight to blind individuals and mobility to paralyzed patients through biocompatible implants that integrated seamlessly with human biology. Agricultural applications were increasing crop yields, while reducing environmental impact through materials that optimized soil conditions and protected plants from climate-related stresses. Maria reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment, understanding that Elena's achievements were built on foundations of courage, systematic documentation, and unwavering commitment to ensuring that breakthrough technologies served human flourishing rather than narrow interests. The hidden elevator in Dr. Mitchell's office had led not just to classified research facilities, but to a future where human potential was expanded through responsible technology development that prioritized civilian benefit over military advantage. Elena's presentation concluded with a comprehensive proposal for global implementation of advanced technologies that could address climate change, eliminate poverty, and create sustainable prosperity for all humanity within the next decade. The proposal was based on systematic analysis of existing capabilities and realistic projections of what could be achieved through coordinated international effort that prioritized humanitarian goals over national competitive advantages. My mother taught me that documentation without action is just academic exercise, Elena said, looking directly at Maria in the gallery. We have documented the capabilities that exist and demonstrated their potential benefits. Now, we must choose whether to implement them for global benefit or allow them to remain restricted to serve narrow interests that limit human potential. The challenge Elena presented to world leaders was clear: Advanced technologies could create unprecedented prosperity and opportunity for all humanity, but only if governments chose cooperation over competition and civilian benefit over military advantage. The UN General Assembly voted unanimously to establish the Global Humanitarian Technology Initiative based on Elena's proposal, appropriating $50 billion for implementing advanced technologies in developing nations over the following 5 years. The initiative would be directed by Elena's research team in coordination with Maria's Technology Transition Institute, ensuring that implementation prioritized local needs and cultural values rather than imposing standardized solutions that ignored regional differences and preferences. Media coverage of Elena's UN presentation portrayed her as representing a new generation of scientists who viewed breakthrough technologies as tools for addressing global challenges rather than creating competitive advantages for wealthy nations or powerful corporations. Interview requests flooded in from educational institutions, technology companies, and government agencies worldwide. But Elena remained focused on implementation rather than publicity, preferring to work directly with communities that would benefit from advanced technology applications. The transformation of Elena from the 8-year-old excited about volcano science fair projects to the 17-year-old addressing world leaders about technological solutions to global challenges represented more than individual achievement. It demonstrated how systematic support for intellectual curiosity and scientific education could create extraordinary contributions to human knowledge and capability. Elena's success was built on opportunities that became available because Maria had documented classified technologies and advocated for their civilian development rather than accepting their restriction to military applications. Elena's research laboratory at the civilian center that had been created from Apex Manufacturing was now a global coordination hub, where young scientists from every continent collaborated on projects that addressed regional challenges while contributing to worldwide knowledge networks. The laboratory included advanced manufacturing capabilities that could produce customized technologies for specific applications, research facilities that supported both theoretical investigation and practical implementation, and communication. Systems that connected researchers with communities worldwide that needed technological solutions to local problems. Maria visited the laboratory regularly, serving as an advisor on policy issues while watching Elena mentor younger researchers who were developing solutions to challenges in their home countries. The sight of brilliant young minds from diverse backgrounds working together on projects that could improve millions of lives reminded Maria daily of why her decision to document classified technologies had been important, not just for the financial benefits it provided her family, but for the opportunities it created for Elena's generation to build a better world through responsible technology development. Elena's current research focused on consciousness interface systems that could facilitate direct communication between humans and artificial intelligence systems that were being developed to address climate change, resource management, and coordination of global humanitarian efforts. The goal was creating collaborative intelligence that combined human creativity and emotional understanding with artificial systems, computational capabilities, and data processing speed, enabling solutions to complex problems that neither humans nor machines could develop independently. "We're not trying to replace human intelligence with artificial systems," Elena explained during a research presentation to international development organizations. "We're creating partnerships between human consciousness and artificial intelligence that amplify both human creativity and computational capability while maintaining human values and ethical oversight." The consciousness interface technologies allowed researchers to directly collaborate with AI systems that could process vast amounts of data, while human partners provided creative insights and ethical guidance that ensured solutions served humanitarian goals. The applications for climate change adaptation were particularly promising. AI systems could analyze global environmental data to identify optimal locations for renewable energy installations, sustainable agriculture projects, and climate-resilient infrastructure, while human partners used consciousness interfaces to ensure that implementation considered cultural values, local preferences, and community needs that data analysis alone couldn't address. The combination of artificial computational capability with human wisdom and emotional intelligence was creating solutions that were both technically optimal and culturally appropriate. Maria's role in the Global Technology Transition Institute had evolved to focus on identifying emerging technologies that could benefit from civilian development while establishing ethical frameworks that prevented misuse of breakthrough capabilities. Her experience documenting classified research had taught her that transparency and public oversight were essential for ensuring that advanced technologies served humanitarian goals rather than being restricted to serve narrow interests or being developed without adequate consideration of potential risks and unintended consequences. The Institute's work included monitoring classified research programs worldwide, advocating for declassification of technologies with civilian applications, and providing technical expertise to policymakers who needed to understand the implications of breakthrough capabilities for making informed decisions about research funding and technology development priorities. Maria's systematic approach to documentation had become a global standard for transparency advocacy that balanced security considerations with public interest in accessing capabilities that could improve people's lives. Elena's 18th birthday was celebrated at the Civilian Research Center with colleagues from around the world who had traveled to recognize her contributions to humanitarian technology development and her leadership in creating collaborative research networks that prioritized global benefit over national competitive advantages. The celebration included demonstrations of technologies that Elena's research had helped develop, neural interfaces that restored communication abilities to stroke patients, advanced materials that provided disaster-resistant housing for refugee communities, and consciousness interface systems that facilitated international cooperation on environmental challenges. But the most meaningful recognition came from letters and videos from people whose lives had been improved through technologies that Elena's research had made accessible. Children in developing countries who could now access advanced educational systems through neural interfaces, disabled individuals who had regained capabilities through biocompatible enhancement technologies, and emergency responders who could coordinate disaster relief efforts through communication systems that transcended traditional barriers of language and distance. "My greatest satisfaction," Elena said during her birthday speech, "comes from knowing that the work we do here creates opportunities for people everywhere to develop their potential and contribute to solutions that benefit everyone." She gestured toward displays showing global implementation of advanced technologies that were improving healthcare, education, agriculture, and emergency response in communities that had previously lacked access to cutting-edge capabilities. The financial benefits of Maria's transition from struggling single mother to internationally recognized technology advocate had been substantial. But more important was the satisfaction of knowing that her courage in documenting classified research had contributed to Elena's generation having opportunities to address global challenges through breakthrough technologies that served humanitarian rather than military purposes. Elena's success was built on foundations of systematic documentation, advocacy for civilian technology development, and unwavering commitment to ensuring that advanced capabilities benefited society broadly rather than remaining restricted to narrow interests. Elena's plans for college included studying at multiple institutions around the world while maintaining her research responsibilities and continuing to advocate for global implementation of advanced technologies that could address climate change, eliminate poverty, and create sustainable prosperity for all humanity. Her educational program was designed collaboratively by leading universities that recognized her unique contributions and wanted to support her continued development while learning from her research methods and implementation strategies. Maria's consulting work would continue focusing on identifying emerging technologies with civilian applications, while Elena pursued advanced education that would prepare her for even greater contributions to humanitarian technology development. The partnership between mother and daughter had evolved from simple survival during financial crisis to global leadership in ensuring that breakthrough capabilities served human flourishing rather than narrow interests that restricted access to life-improving technologies. The story of Maria's discovery of classified research facilities in an abandoned manufacturing building had become a case study taught in policy schools, technology programs, and ethics courses worldwide as an example of how individual courage and systematic documentation could influence global technology development and ensure that breakthrough capabilities served public benefit rather than remaining hidden from the people whose lives they could improve. Elena's generation was inheriting a world where neural interfaces could restore capabilities to disabled individuals, where advanced materials could make infrastructure resilient and sustainable, where communication technologies could connect people across any distance instantaneously, and where consciousness interface systems could facilitate cooperation between humans and artificial intelligence to address challenges that neither could solve independently. The hidden elevator that had led Maria into classified research had ultimately opened pathways to a future where human potential was expanded rather than just human destructive capability. Standing together at the Civilian Research Center that had been created from the former Apex manufacturing facility, watching young scientists from around the world collaborate on projects that addressed global challenges through advanced technologies, Maria and Elena understood that their story represented the power of systematic documentation and advocacy to ensure that breakthrough capabilities served human flourishing rather than narrow interests that kept revolutionary technologies hidden from the people whose lives they could transform for the better. The abandoned factory that had once concealed government secrets had become a beacon of hope for humanity's future, where Elena's generation was developing solutions to the greatest challenges facing the world through technologies that prioritized civilian benefit over military advantage, global cooperation over national competition, and human flourishing over narrow interests that limited access to life-improving capabilities that could create unprecedented prosperity and opportunity for all people everywhere. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.